Hi everyone, this is Lauren, your sewing buddy, and today we are here for part 2 of the fit sample of this skirt. Today I'll be creating the trim that crisscrosses the skirt. It's out of this black and silver material. You can see here how that crisscrosses just on the long panel, and there are 6 strips altogether. I just need to make sure that they're going to be the correct length. This fabric came from the bargain basement at Costume College. I'm lucky that there was so much of it because it's seen me through. This is the 3rd time I'm making this skirt. And I know that there's not nearly enough here for a full production of the skirt, so I'm going to have to find a reasonable substitute because I did, I think, find this exact fabric on the Mood website, but it was discontinued. So I'll have to find something different. You can see here where it's been cut for previous skirts. I cut it vertically because I want that silver stripe to go pretty much right down the middle of the strip. So with my tape measure here, I'm going to double check my numbers, get my scissors handy. I have already measured out how long each of these needs to be. There's one that's a little bit shorter, and then, well, 2 that are a little bit shorter, and then 4 that are all the same length. So once I get those marked and cut, then I will be good to go. And you can see me here sort of debating if I want these to be 1 stripe down the middle or 2 stripes down the middle. Based on the overall look and how wide they are on my pattern, I'm going to go with 1 stripe down the middle, which means I'm using 4 of the rows altogether. So 1 on each side will be turned under, and then 2 in the middle, so that we have that stripe directly down the center of the trim. So I'm just going to pre-snip all of those so that I don't get confused in the future, because that is something that could easily confuse me with just counting over those 4. And yeah, from there it's just cutting up to where I've marked the length. I put in a little snip horizontally where the length on the first one should be, and then once I get those 2 cut, I will cut a little bit further for the remaining 4 strips. And there is a benefit to this fabric in that I have that nice clean line that I can follow, so that I know these will be perfectly straight, perfectly on grain. Not that on grain matters too much here, but you know, just to keep things neat and tidy. There is the issue that the silver thread does tend to pull out at that very edge, but that's going to be tucked under anyway, so it doesn't really matter, except that then I have silver threads in my carpet. But vacuum cleaner takes care of those pretty handily. And this is another case where wouldn't a rotary cutter make that easier? I am still not a fan of the rotary cutter. You can fight me. I do not care. I prefer the scissors because I feel like I have a lot more control. I feel like there's much less risk of me slicing into myself with these. So I will use my fabric scissors and you can use your rotary cutters, and we can both be on our merry way. For the length on these, it's not super important that it's precise, although much better to be too long than too short, because the ends will be trimmed off anyway and then covered with a layer of trim. But here I'm snipping up a little bit longer because I've got my first 2 done, so now I only have these 4 to do. I'm just going to slice those all off in one go and then work at separating them from there. And while I get these cut, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to my channel, like this video, leave any comments that you have. I enjoy feedback, and I will usually work at making changes if I have anyone in the comments saying, like, you need need background music, or you need to adjust your colors, or what have you. Also, I do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi set up, and right now any funds that you're able to give there would go towards getting these patterns and garments actually manufactured. Not the patterns manufactured, just the garments based on the patterns. And of course, none of that is required. I appreciate you just being here and sewing with me or creating with me. Whatever your creative endeavor may be, you are more than welcome to be here. But links for those, as well as for social media, are in the description to this video. So check that out after you're done watching, or while you're watching, go ahead, take a break, and take a look. With those cut out now, it's time to figure out how they get placed on here. I've pressed in the edges, as you can see, so now we just have that center stripe with the 2 black stripes going down the side. So what I'm going to do is measure from the top of my pattern down to where that first piece of trim sits, and then measure that out on my actual skirt. These are measurements that should go into the tech pack. You'd say the first trim starts here and ends at this depth, and then second piece of trim is this far down from that, and so on and so forth. But for right now, because this is just me and the fit sample, I am doing it one bit at a time. Smart Lauren would actually make notes on that, but I know there may be adjustments to the pattern, so that means that there may be adjustments to these measurements as well. But I'm starting with just that little bit overlapped on the edge there. Once again, trim is going to go over the top of that like so. So I will trim that down after it's stitched on, or I may just shift it over before I sew it. But in any case, you will not see the raw edges of this trim. So now I just need to see how far that center cross point is, because that will make sure that I'm at the right angle. I am only going to show you pinning half of this skirt, because if I did the entire thing, we would be here for a long time. But make sure that the skirt is folded exactly in half, match up those seam lines, find that center point, let it drape itself out. There we go. And then I just need to measure down on here where that center point is and mark it. And this is the top of where it begins that crisscross. So then with that marked, I can stretch out my trim and make sure that the top of my trim matches up with the top of that point, and that I'm not pulling it out of position at the top. So you don't want the fabric to be loose underneath the trim, or the trim to be loose over the fabric, because that will cause problems when I try to sew it down. But for right now, I just want to make sure that's a fairly straight line. Make sure everyone's equally tensed, and then just give that a quick little pinning. Being very gentle to make sure that I only get one layer of fabric here. And there we go. Okay. We got the first half of the first piece of trim laid out, so yay! And then from there I need to measure out where that next piece is. Actually, I'm measuring down to where this first piece would end. And I am going straight down the pattern instead of following the curve, because I do want to make good use of the tape measure, and not, there's just more chance for error if I try to follow that curve instead of just measuring straight down. So once again, from the seam line, going straight down, the top of the trim should be right about here. Double check that. the other thing is because I measured these lengths pretty closely, if it's off in one direction or the other, then the end of the trim is going to be either too long or too short, because that's how geometry works. So I'm going to pin this in once again, make sure I only have one layer of fabric, because I don't want to pin this through the short side of the skirt. And of course it's fighting with me because that's what these things do. But after that struggle, just get that pinned in, everything is good, and time to move on to the next strip. You can see how nice and clean all of that will be. It's not perfect yet. It's going to take some fussing, but as long as I get those endpoints where they need to be, that's what I'm concerned with for right now. So this one starts the same position as the last one, just on the other side. So get that locked in. And then next I need to find that center point again and make sure that they crisscross where they need to. Luckily I've still got that dot right there, so as long as that's perfectly couched between these two pieces, everything there is golden. And then I can go back to the first side, and you can see this piece is sitting a little bit long, so I want to make sure I've got that measurement correctly, because it's difficult to go off of the angle from here when both sides are on different places, but got that situated. So you can see that's just going to repeat 3 times down this skirt, and let's come back when those are all pinned on. And there we go. I'm just matching up that last center cross now. You can see they do crisscross on the side as well, however that's much easier to eyeball here. So yeah, all those are good. I'm just going to give a few more support pins to make sure everything's going to stay put, and then I did only do that one half, but I'll get the other half and sew it all down and show you what that will be, because you can see that trim, it adds a lot. Okay, here we go. It's all stitched on nice and flat. I did 1 straight stitch down each side of each piece of trim, and I have not applied the side trim yet or trimmed down the edges here. How many times can I say trim in a single sentence? I don't know. What I'm doing here is double checking how much of the trim I'm supposed to use around the edge. She did mark that on the pattern, so I'm going to go based on her measurements and see how that matches up with what I know. So first I need to get this all measured out, and then I will start applying. Now that I've got my trim measured out, it's time to start pinning this on. And of course what I want to do is make sure that it's going to cover the ends of each of these bits of fabric trim. Also I want to make sure that I've got the end. There we go. So I apologize for this being slightly off screen. But what I'm doing is just snipping some loose threads here, and then I'm going to cut off the very end of the trim just as close as I can without actually cutting any stitches. So just a little bit of cleanup here before we get started. Okay, I'm finally ready to start applying this trim. I'm going all the way up to the top because that way it'll all get caught in the waistband. I just need to make sure that it covers both the edge of the folded overlace and then the edge of the fabric trim. And I can always make minor adjustments as I sew along. But this way I know that I have the length that I need and I can have it mostly all in the correct place. I have to be a little bit careful when I'm pinning this because if I try to pin through one of the edge loops it will pull, but as long as I'm pinning mostly through the very center, everything should work out fine. So I'm just going to work my way all the way around with that and then check back in. So it turns out that while I was applying the folded lace on the edge, I accidentally caught an extra fold of the skirt itself, so I'm going to need to unstitch that and fix it. But with that corrected, I have applied the trim and everything looks good right now. I just need to put in a zipper and a waistband. Waistband first and then zipper, and then we'll be ready to send this off to the fit model. So once again, I'm not trying to catch the lace in the edge of the waistband because that would be too wide. So what I'm going to do is just sort of let that fall and then catch whatever catches in there naturally from having it fall. I am not sure why this is so north of screen, but I thought I was in frame. But this is just lining up the edge of the waistband with the edge of the zipper opening so that I can make sure the zipper sits in properly, and then working my way around, getting that pinned on, and I will see you for actually installing the zipper. And for the zipper, I don't have an invisible zipper, which would be the ideal. What I do have is a standard zipper here. It's just long enough. I just need to get these staples out of the backing, which I'm not sure why they decide to staple these to the backing after all these years. I'm sure there's a better way to secure it to the packaging at this point. But I am going to open and close the zipper a couple of times to make sure that it is working properly, because it is a little bit sticky. Because I think this is another bargain basement find. I just sort of grabbed every zipper I could get my hands on because who doesn't need zippers? So then I determined the way that I want the zipper to sit and then sort of flip it to the outside because I want the raw edge to be under the zipper, and make sure that the top is aligned with where I want the top of the zipper to sit, which that stopper on there is right at the, or right below the seam for the very top of the waistband. So I just need to get that pinned all the way down, and then I'll use my zipper foot to secure it as close to the teeth as I can. That won't get me all the way to the bottom of the zipper, however, the zipper slit goes, stops before the bottom of the zipper, so that should be okay. And then just want to make sure I get the top of that tucked in, because once again we don't want the zipper edge flailing about anywhere. And then so that's the way the edge will look when it's all said and done. I just want to do that waistband last. And here we have our nicely installed zipper. I did do a little triangle cut at the very bottom of the zipper, just so that I could get it to lay flat for the fabric, because it is wider than an invisible zipper, so it did need to have a little bit of an open up, so it's more of a rectangular shaped opening than a simple straight cut. So now what I'm doing is pinning the edges of the waistband into place. So I just followed that fold over from installing the zipper, and then I'm putting the pins in, making sure to enclose all of those raw edges. So the edge of the waistband that I'm working with right now is folded in about ½ an inch. That way everything is nice and tidy and there is no raw edge visible at all. So I just need to pin that all the way around, and then we will we'll have a finished skirt. And there it is together with the vest, but we want to focus on the skirt for right now, so let's get that off of there. And yeah, this is the finished product. So thank you for sitting with me while I crafted this, I hope that you have also created something gorgeous in your time with me. I will see you again next week where I'm working on something for my spouse, which is very exciting. And in the meantime, go create beautiful things.